We have a special guest that's going to talk about healing that you can receive. You know, receiving a cancer diagnosis is scary news that no one ever wants to accept. But our next guest battled his diagnosis head on and shared his journey in his best-selling book, Chris Beats Cancer. Now Chris Wark is back with a daily devotional to support, encourage, and inspire you or anybody that you know that is on their cancer healing journey. Chris, welcome to Hope Today.
Hi, it's so great to be with you.
So Chris, you know, take us back about a little bit about your journey of how you beat cancer for our viewers to know.
Well, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer when I was 26, and it was in 2003, which really feels like a long time ago, almost 17 years ago. And, you know, as a believer, one of the first verses that came to mind when I was diagnosed was Romans 8:28, which says, God works all things for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. And, you know, lots of people have heard that verse, you know, throughout their lives, if they're believers or Christians, or they go to church. And it's a nice idea. But when you're really faced with difficult circumstance, with trials, with tribulations, right, with bad news, that is an opportunity to exercise your faith and actually believe. And this is what's so important right now. The election, the economy, COVID, everything that's circulating in our world right now it's so important to choose to believe that God is going to work everything out for your good. It's a simple act of faith. And I was forced to do that with my cancer diagnosis, because there's two ways you can go, right? You can go into discouragement and despair and live in a constant state of fear, worry, and anxiety. Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow. Or you can choose to trust that God is going to work things for your good, that he's going to make a way for you, that he's going to light your path. And that was the choice that I made. And I talk about that in my first book, tell my whole story in the first book, Chris Beat Cancer. And now I've got a new book that's a daily reader and a daily devotional to help encourage folks and inspire them and give them practical information that they can use to walk out a life of faith and health and healing.
And Chris, what would you say are some of those practical tips that somebody, you know, who's watching right now, that they've gotten that cancer diagnosis, or they're just really believing God to heal their body, but there were some practical things that you did that really made a big difference?
Well, one of the most important things that cancer patients are not told is that the choices that they make at home can make all the difference between life or death. You know, you're not a powerless victim of disease. Our choices matter, and our choices are powerful. And so making radically healthy choices at home, choosing to take care of yourself in a way that you never have before, can literally save your life. And so some of that practical things is eating a diet that's rich in fruits and vegetables. God made it. It's good, right? Going back to the Garden of Eden, that's what I did. A plant-based diet, tons of fruits and vegetables. I cut out all the junk food, meat and dairy, processed food, fast food, all that stuff. Exercise is so vital. Exercise turns on cancer protective genes and turns off cancer promoting genes. Diet does this too, by the way. And forgiveness, a huge, huge step you can take to heal your heart and heal your body. Because if you're carrying bitterness, we see this throughout the Bible. If you carry bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness, it will rot you to the core. It's not just a mental or emotional sickness or spiritual sickness. It will cause physical sickness in your body. And so these are the themes that are throughout my new book that I just help encourage folks to walk out in their life.
Chris, let's say somebody has just found out they've been diagnosed with cancer. And I'm sure you remember that feeling and the fear and the anxiety and possibly depression that could come with that. What's one thing you did to stay on top of it, to overcome?
Well, fear is a topic throughout the new book, overcoming fear and giving your worries and fears to the Lord. And so that is what I learned how to do very quickly after being diagnosed with cancer. And I just want to say, cancer is way worse than most of the stuff going on in the world right now, right? And so if you've lost your job, if you have family members with COVID, if you're quarantined, if you're worried about the election, believe me, these worries pale in comparison to the worries that a cancer patient has. And no matter what your challenge or your fear, you can make the choice to give that fear to God. And so every day when fear and anxiety would creep into my mind and my heart, because it's an everyday thing, right? Fear, just when you have cancer, it's just the fear is just ever present. I just learned to quickly take that thought captive and say, God, you know what? I'm giving you my fear. I trust you. You're in control. I'm going to do everything that I can do to help myself, to rebuild my temple. Show me what I need to do. And more importantly, show me what I need to change. And I'm trusting you with the rest, right? I'm not going to walk or live in fear. And that was not just a one-time prayer. That was a multi-time per day prayer.
Chris, when you were diagnosed with cancer, did you just believe and trust the doctors, or did you do your own research and do your own homework and let God sort of lead you and guide you through this process?
Well, I definitely did my own homework, and I took the road less traveled. I had surgery, but I said no to chemotherapy, and I went the natural route. And that was scary, right? Chemotherapy was scary. Natural was scary. But I decided to take control of my life and my health and to do everything in my power to help myself. And so whether you do everything the doctor says or not, the bigger message that I am trying to share with folks is that you've got to take ownership of your situation. You know, if you have a problem, whether you caused the problem or not, it is now your responsibility to work to solve it. And so that requires energy and effort, and you have to set aside your preconceived notions and be willing to learn and do new things and change your life. And there's a few hallmarks of patients who survive against the odds. I call it the beat cancer mindset, and I talk about it in the book. But the number one characteristic that patients who survive have is that they believe they can get well. That's where it all starts. Right. They believe they can get well. And from there, they take massive action. They take responsibility for their life. They're willing to change their whole life. And that means willing to change what you eat, willing to change the way you think, willing to forgive. And they make a decision to enjoy the process. They embrace the new season of life, right? Instead of, you think about the Israelites. God rescued them from Egypt. He delivered them from Egypt, but they didn't go from Egypt to a better place. They went into the wilderness, right? They actually went in through a difficult time. In order to get to the promised land, they had to go through some difficulty. Well, as we know, their response to difficulty, to the wilderness, was not ideal. They grumbled and complained. They didn't trust God. They were like, we want to go back to Egypt. And a journey that should have taken them about 2 weeks on foot ended up taking 40 years. God let them wander in circles until the old unbelieving generation died off. And the lesson, there's a lot of lessons in that, but one of them is that, when we enter a difficult season of life, if we grumble and complain and approach it with an attitude that is faithless, it's going to prolong that difficult season. And so it's important that we just buckle down and trust God and say, you know what, I'm going to embrace this new season. I don't like it, right? I don't have to like it, but I'm going to trust that God is going to bring me through the wilderness into the promised land, that my life's going to be better after this than it was before, whether it's cancer or losing the job or COVID or whatever.
Well, I wanted to dig into that just a second. The grumbling and the complaining, and people are calling you, they're asking you, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And how easy it is to just sort of unload all of those toxic words and toxic thoughts. So can we just hang on to that for just a minute? How important it is, your mindset going through cancer and what's coming out of your mouth while going through cancer.
Mindset is something that, I think many of us throughout our life come to believe that whatever we think is who we are, right? That our thoughts are us. And we get into patterns, and they can be very negative patterns of thought. Like, we all know people that are really negative and cynical and critical and judgmental, right? Well, those people weren't born that way. right? They didn't come out just like a critical baby, right? They became that way over time, experiences and people and circumstance, and they allowed their thinking to shift toward a negative, basically put a negative filter on their mind. But you can change that. Like, you have the power over your thoughts. And when you catch yourself thinking negatively, critically, tempted to complain, you can stop yourself in the act, right? You can interrupt those thoughts and replace them. So you can choose to think positively in any situation, but it is a choice, right? And it's many times it's easier to think negatively when things aren't going your way. And look, every day in life, whether you have cancer or not, things are not going to go your way, right? People are going to irritate you or make you mad or disappoint you, right? Or your plans are going to go haywire. And in those moments, you have a choice, right? And you have a choice to get upset and frustrated and let your emotions run wild, or you can stop and say, you know what, I don't like this. This is not the plan. This person is not treating me the way I want to be treated, but I'm going to choose to forgive them. I'm going to let it go. God, you're in control. I trust you. And I'm not going to let this steal my joy. I posted something on my Facebook page yesterday that got a very surprising response, mostly positive. But I said, no matter who wins the election, I'm going to be happy, because happiness is a choice.
Right.
And I have 1,000 things to be thankful for. And that's something that cancer taught me. It taught me how to be thankful in the most difficult circumstance of my life. And my happiness doesn't come from Donald Trump or Joe Biden. It doesn't come from a politician, right? It doesn't come from other people. The joy of the Lord is my strength, right? So my happiness comes from within. And there's a very simple and practical way that you can stir up your happiness, and that is by practicing gratitude. Throughout Psalms, David and the psalmists are constantly giving thanks to God, right? Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Like, what is that? What is thanksgiving? It's saying, thank you, God, that I can see, that I can hear, that I'm alive, that I can get out of bed, that I can feed myself, even if I have cancer in my body. Thank you, God, that I'm not dying in the hospital right now. So practicing gratitude is something that, and we're so blessed in our country. Like, we are so blessed. Like, we're spoiled. We're rich, all of us, compared to Cambodia and Ethiopia and so many countries in the world where people are starving and have virtually nothing. And so it's so easy for me to well up joy just by practicing gratitude. And in a moment of frustration or fear or difficulty, if you stop and count your blessings, it will completely reset your perspective. It'll flip that attitude switch, and it will give you, just give you a fresh injection of joy and thankfulness in your heart. And that's what I talk about in the new book. That's really what Beat Cancer Daily is about.
Thank you so much for just sharing your heart and just how, walking through your journey and even the suffering that you went through brought about so much joy. And his book is Beat Cancer Daily. And I just want to encourage, if you're watching right now and you're dealing with cancer, give us a call at 888-665-4483. And I personally want to give you this copy of this book because there's so much goodness in here. There's so much encouraging words and meditation, things that you can rest on and you can sit on and believe on if you're walking through. So Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you both. My pleasure.